Welcome to Everyday Cooking with Ann. Today we are going to be making Italian breadsticks from scratch. I love this recipe and it's a huge hit wherever I take it or make it for my family. I love this recipe because you can make this in just a very few minutes. You only have to use a short amount of time to let it raise before you roll them out, put them in your pan, and put wonderful, wonderful things on top of it to make it so Italian and so delicious. Let me show you the ingredients that are going to go into our recipe today. We are going to have 3 cups of, and I use bread flour for anything that I'm using for dough raising or anything like that. So bread flour, but I think regular flour works just as well. But this is just my preference because I happen to have a lot of bread flour on hand. We're going to use a half a teaspoon of salt and 2 tablespoons of sugar, and we'll be putting in a whole tablespoon of yeast. Now, most often I like to use regular yeast because that's what I'm most familiar with. But because we're still in the COVID crisis, it's hard to find regular yeast. And so now I'm using instant yeast. Instant yeast is going to be added directly to our flour mixture. And then the other thing we're going to be having ready to go in just a moment is 1.5 cups of warm water. Now this is at about 110 degrees. So I'm putting in my larger bowl the 1.5 cups of warm water. You want that because you need that to activate your, proof your yeast with your flour and everything else and get it ready to go. Okay, what we're going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and add to this our sugar so it'll start dissolving, and the half a teaspoon of salt too, so it'll start dissolving. And then I'm going to put our tablespoon of yeast. Like I said, this is instant yeast, not regular dry yeast, but instant dry yeast, to our flour mixture. And I'm going to mix it in here. Now I have measured out 3 cups of flour. We may need a little bit more. I have some handy, especially when we're going to be doing some kneading here in just a minute. So I'm going to stir this with a wooden spoon and get this all dissolved nicely. Oh, by the way, the other ingredient too is 2 tablespoons of oil, and I'm going to add that right now as well to our water mixture. This is olive oil, and you really want olive oil because it's a great oil to use for anything Italian. I use it in my dough that I make for pizza and other doughs that I'd like a little bit of flavor to, any rosemary dough or focaccia or something like that. This is the kind of oil you want to put in. So you've got your fat, a little bit of sugar that'll help activate with the yeast. You got your salt. And then I'm going to go ahead and add into our mixture, and this is why it's so easy. You just need really one bowl to do it. Add a little bit of flour at a time and mix it together. And I always just do this recipe in a bowl. I mean, I could, I guess, use my mixer, but I have just found really that I like to make this recipe up by hand because it's not too hard to do by hand. I don't like to add the flour all at once because you can see that I did sort of sift it with my wire whisk ahead of time because I want to make sure no big clumps are going to come in here. We want a nice smooth dough when we're finished here. And if you've ever seen any of my other bread videos, I like to just add a little bit of flour at a time because if you get too much flour in here, the consistency and the beauty of your end product is not correct. So bread making is one of those mysterious things where you have to just practice and watch how to do it until you can get the feel of what it's supposed to be like. So I'm adding a little bit more now. And on any given day, this dough might not be right with just the 3 cups. It may be a little bit less than that, and sometimes it is. Now I'm looking at this and thinking I'll add a little bit when I'm doing the kneading process. Okay, now this is how simple this is too. I'm going to take a little bit of flour here. I've got it pretty much mixed. Okay, and I'm going to put the rest of my flour back right here on the table and knead this for about 3 minutes. And then I'm going to let it sit here and rest. But let me just get this all kneaded. And if I need a little bit more flour, I'll do that. But I want to go. So you can see I had the whole 3 cups of flour, but I didn't use all of it because now I'm using the rest of it to knead it. And it looks like it'll be just about perfect. We won't need to add anything extra. Too much flour in any of your dough recipes is going to make it tough and kind of flat and not as beautiful. So that's why you just need to practice and practice until you kind of get the feel for what you need so it will stay light and beautiful. Okay, I have been kneading the dough for about 3 or 4 minutes now. And now the next part of the recipe is it just sits here and rests for about 10 minutes. Then I will kind of punch it down one more time, and then we're going to be raising it. Before we get started with that, or before I end with this segment, let me just tell you a couple other things that we're going to be doing. You're going to be needing to have a 15 by 10 jelly roll pan like this, and we're going to be melting a whole cube of butter. Now this is why this is going to turn out so great, is the butter, of course. And we're going to be topping it while it's baking with garlic salt. And then at the very end of our baking, we're going to be sprinkling some of this cheese all over all of the breadsticks. So I'm going to show you how we roll those out in a little bit. After we let this raise, we're going to let it raise here for 30 minutes to an hour, and then we're going to show you how to roll them out. About 10 to 15 minutes later, and you can see my dough has already started rising. When you're using rapid rise yeast or instant yeast, your proofing time doubles like 50%. So that's why it's even better to use that in this recipe, because I'm going to now go ahead and punch this down again. See, it's nice and jiggly and just really kind of fluffy, and we're going to punch it down one more time. Knead it just one more time like this. And so we're back to the size we were before. And what I've done, and this is how I do things, I don't really get another whole clean bowl. I just go ahead and put a little bit of oil in my bowl. And I take my dough and I put it upside down here to coat the top. And then I just put it right in here like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover it. You can just leave it on the counter for about 30 minutes to an hour at the most. You don't need to wait long for breadsticks. Okay, so I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap. I'm going to put it in my oven because it's a proofing oven, and I have a little button I push that proofs it perfectly for me. So I'm going to check this probably in about 30 minutes to see how it looks, and maybe I don't need to go an hour. So this is what it looks like now, and I'll show you when I take it out of the oven what it looks like. Okay, I timed this for exactly 30 minutes, and you can see how much it raised from the small little ball in the bottom of the bowl to a nice big mound here. And this is why this bread is so great, because you can start it in the afternoon and serve it for dinner, and the people will be totally amazed. Okay, what I'm going to do is go ahead and punch this down. You can see how many bubbles are in there. Just getting it punched down, but you want to still keep it light like this, because these are going to be very, like my favorite word, fluffy breadsticks. They're not a hard breadstick. They're nice and fluffy. So for those of you who haven't seen any of my other bread recipes before, I use what is called a pastry cloth, and I have a French rolling pin, and this is called a little stockinette, and it's how I roll out cookies, breads, rolls, you name it. I use this piece of equipment all the time with the bread for breads and cookies and rolls and things like that. So about once a year I replace this because it gets really dirty, because you can't wash this and have it turn out to use again. So you just use it and scrape it off. I use this little dough scraper to scrape everything off to keep it clean, and then I put a new layer of flour on here. The reason I use this is because that way you're not incorporating too much flour in anything that you're making, and it'll turn out so much better than if you just keep incorporating flour. So here we go. I put some on the pastry cloth, and now I'm going to take my dough and I'm going to roll it out. And this is my jelly roll pan. This is the one I'm going to use. So I'm going to use that here to measure, because I'm going to want to roll it out into just about the same size as the pan I'm using because I'm going to fill the whole pan. So I want to have this be in a rectangle, which I'm trying to get together right now. This is about looks like when I get ready to do cinnamon rolls, what it looks like too to make rolls. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this whole cube of butter in this pan, all over the pan. And I'm going to use my little trusty, I love this because it's got a good, nice, not too sharp of edge. You can see it's not like a knife, but it's basically a dough cutter and scraper. Anytime you need to scrape up dough, you use it, and I love it. This is a Wilton brand, and this is a sturdier brand than anything I've seen in another kitchen store, so I really like this one. So it depends on how big you want your breadsticks, but I make them about an inch thick, so I'm going to go like this. But once these raise in the pan, you can cut these in half and feed more people too, so don't worry about that. Okay, you can see these are all different sizes. You can make it however you want, how thick you want. So that cut all of those. And then I'm going to start taking each one and I'm going to roll it in the butter and just line it up in the pan. Okay, they're all buttered nicely, and I'm going to let these raise in this pan for about 20 minutes before I put them into the oven for about 20 minutes. So from here it'll be about 40 minutes. Before I put that on, I'm going to sprinkle it lightly with my high quality garlic salt. Of course, if you don't like garlic salt and just want to breadstick without it, that's fine, but we're actually going to an Italian dinner at some friends tonight, and I told her I would bring my Italian breadsticks, so I do like the garlic salt. Let these sit and raise for, I'm going to put them back in my bread proofing oven, and I'm going to cover them again with some plastic wrap just to keep them from drying out. So this will only take 20 more minutes, and then we'll turn the oven on to 375 and they'll bake for 20 more minutes. And so just so you know, we'll be putting the cheese on right before they're finished so that they melt just perfectly on, and I'll show you how to do that. We're back. I wanted to show you what it looks like when the breadsticks have risen, what they look like. You can see they're nice and fluffy, ready to go in the oven. They've been actually raising they're supposed to raise 20 minutes. I put them in, I let them raise for about 30, which is fine. You decide how big you like them. If you like them a little chewier, they can be smaller. I'm going to put them in our 375 degree oven for 20 minutes. 5 minutes before that, I'm going to take them out, put on our Parmesan cheese so it will melt nicely on top of each one, and we'll see how they look when they're finished. Okay, I actually took the breadsticks and put the cheese on it about 3 minutes before. Actually, I put it for 2 minutes later, and so it's been 29 minutes. Oh no, how long? I forget. It's been 19 minutes altogether that they were baking, okay? So that's what my oven did. Yours might be a little different. We've been at 375. Let me just show you, we're taking out the breadsticks now. They're nice and golden brown, and the cheese has been melted nicely on them. We're ready to serve them with our Italian dinner.